Hey creatives, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nila and I make videos about bullet journaling and creativity here. I'm very happy that you joined me in today's video where we will be setting up some reading journal inspired pages in my bullet journal. So I actually didn't see myself setting up something like that. And the reason for this is because I wouldn't consider myself as a heavy reader. I just read for entertainment basically, and mainly I do that in the evenings and read like a chapter of a book before I go to sleep. So there's not that much actually to track in a reading journal, and this is why I'm not really setting up a specific reading journal. I just wanted to do something that reminds me of a reading journal, and so I do that in my 2023 bullet journal, which we already set up in my last video. If you did not see that, I will link that somewhere here in the video. And how we are going to do this, I will show you in a second in the actual setup. I hope you enjoy this video, I hope it's inspiring to you, and yeah, as always, grab yourself your favorite drink, make yourself comfortable and cozy, and yeah, enjoy this reading journal setup with me. So let's dive into the setup. I wanted to create something that should feel like a reading journal, but making that inside my bullet journal. The theme that I was going for is inspired by dark or light academia, even though I don't know exactly what that is. Maybe I'm missing out on social media. I've also asked myself if I'm too old for that stuff, because I have actually no idea what is going on with that. But whenever I looked that up on Pinterest, I liked the aesthetics and I wanted to go for something inspired by that. And I also wanted to create something that gave me some sorts of library feelings and imitate some bookshelves. Obviously because of the reading. And also I decided to add these pages to my bullet journal a few days after setting it up. And that is actually what I really like about bullet journaling, that you can always add some stuff whenever you need and want to, and that there are basically no limitations. So talking a bit about the process that I was going through and how I wanted to create the reading journal vibes. So yeah, I tried to create something that would feel like an actual reading journal, and I planned that on 2 double spreads where I would cut a Dutch door in the middle of them, so that the bookshelves that I drew would be visible around the Dutch door in the middle. Not sure if how I'm describing it makes sense, but you will see while we are doing that. And for the paintings, I'm using the Marabou watercolor paints, which come in 12 different tubes. I recently bought them, maybe you've seen that in my community tab. I've been starting using that and so far enjoying it really. And it is actually the first time I'm using watercolor in my bullet journal, and it is also the biggest watercolor project so far for me. So I didn't really know what I was doing, but great, just received a package. Where were we? So yeah, so I actually didn't really know what I was doing, but somehow you have to start, and I took that as like the project to practice and get better, and it was really enjoyable and fun doing that, even though it might not be super professional and technical perfect. Technically perfect, you know what I mean. And also the notebook therapy bullet journal that I'm using handled the pain quite well. There's no bleeding through the paper, even though the paper created some waves, but with pressing the pages and closing the notebook, I believe that that should even out over time. So after I sketched out the bookshelves and everything, I started to color them, tried to layer the paint a bit so that it would not look super flat and boring. And as you can see, I am mixing the colors on a mixing palette that I bought recently to put my paints in there, let them dry so that I can use them over and over and don't have to get them out of the tubes and creating a mess. I wanted a color palette, and so far this is working pretty well for me. And as always, all the supplies that I'm using will be linked in the info box, but if you're missing something, just ask me and I'm happy to answer you and help you. So why did I decide to create a reading journal, which is not actually a reading journal? As I already said, I'm not that much of a reader. I read really slow and mainly to fall asleep better. But whenever I take some time to read for enjoyment, to sit on the sofa, have a cozy drink and just read a book, I realize how much I actually love that and how the time that I spent reading really feels like quality time. And now it gets a bit weird, but maybe it makes sense to you. The other day I was watching quite a few videos of a YouTube channel called Friendly Space Ninja, and he makes videos about TV shows and stuff, and I was watching some about Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries. Really interesting videos in my opinion, and these were shows that I've watched as a teenager partly, but mainly as an adult, and even though I enjoyed them, I found them quite ridiculous to be honest. And so I was remembering that I was actually reading some of the books to both shows as a teenager, and I remember that I liked them. I'm not sure if that is because I was a teenager back then, or if the books are actually better than the shows, which is what I've heard quite often. So I got to the point where I thought that it would be interesting to read these books now and that I would probably enjoy that. And this is when I actually thought I gotta start a reading journal. The problem is that at the same time I am pretty sure that my reading habits are not that intense so that I could and would actually fill a whole reading journal with it. This is why we're just going for the fake reading journal. And the problem is that I find it quite hard to convince my brain to sit down and read instead of like scrolling mindlessly through social media, watching hundreds of YouTube videos or binge watching, let's be honest, trash shows like Too Hot to Handle, even though I really like shows like that. But But yeah, somehow it always seems easier to go to doing these things like scrolling and watching. And I think that is probably because the dopamine kick is easier to achieve with those things, while I actually know that the happiness that comes from reading usually lasts longer. So I thought that maybe my bullet journal might be helpful in supporting my wish and my goal to read more. And with creating a reading journal feeling, for me it might be motivating and inspiring for me. That's what I hope. If that's a reality, we will see. If you have any tips on how to convince your brain to do the not so easy thing, to sit down and read, let me know. I guess this wouldn't be a reading journal video if we wouldn't actually talk about books. So yeah, I've been thinking about my taste of books lately, and I came to conclusion that I think it is something between romance, fantasy, and probably young adult books. And I think that books are a thing for me that I don't feel the need to grow up for. Like with reading more youthful books and not having to worry about making the adult choice here is quite comforting to me, I believe. And this is probably also the reason why my absolute favorite book series is Harry Potter. Even though, to be honest here, I was reading the whole series the first time in 2020. And I've been reading the first to the fifth book like in primary school and a bit after that, I guess, but I just hated the fifth book so much that I didn't finish it, and that just left me so uninterested in Harry Potter that, yeah, as I said, I didn't finish it since 2020. But since I found so much comfort and happiness in this fantasy world and the books, I'm definitely sure that this will remain my favorite. I also like to read biographies sometimes, and one of my favorite books is the Slash autobiography. You probably don't know who Slash is. He is the guitarist of the 80s, 90s rock band Guns N' Roses. You might have heard of them. And I was really obsessed with them as a teenager, and it is probably still one of my favorite bands. And I read the book first when I was about 16 and reread it recently, like 8 years later. And realizing how much I've changed and not being the total naive teenager I was back then, finding everything so cool, fascinating, and hot. That is definitely weird, I know. yeah, and seeing that in a total different way now, more like a realistic perspective, it was a really interesting and different way of realizing how I grew and how my personal development happened over the years. Yeah, definitely interesting to reread books sometimes. And now with this reading journal project, I got into book recommendations and pins of TikToks on Pinterest, since I don't use Instagram or TikTok. That's my social media of choice. And I already have a lot of ideas what I want to read and what I want to put on my reading list and maybe next list, and to fill out the spreads. But yeah, I would totally love to know what your favorite books and genres are, and if you have any must-read recommendations. So as you already saw, I stamped the titles of the sections with some nice serif stamps that are by a brand called Paper Poetry, as well as the stamp pad is. And yeah, the sections I chose were my reading list, where I would put the books that I definitely want to read. Then on the Dutch door there are my monthly reads, where I would hopefully write in the books I read through the months. But to be realistic here, that will probably just be one book a month, and that is totally fine with me. And then on the other page I have a maybe next list, where I would put books that I maybe want to read but I'm not sure of, or that I've heard of somewhere, and also a little space to write down favorite books through the year. Also, I struggled with the light again. Like, even though I used some even though I used the lights that I already own for filming, I couldn't help daylight to happen, and so there's some changes. And another thing that I realized over the last weeks, I guess, is that there are totally different ways of spelling words. Like, I wasn't aware that American and British English is quite different sometimes, and so I believe I struggle a lot with words that have the OU spelling in it, like favorite or color. And I'm so confused, like, why is it different in America or England? Like, I believe that I've learned British English in school, so I'm used to the OU, but now I'm so confused and insecure. But yeah, I guess you always learn something new. So going back to the setup, I finished the paintings with adding details on the shelves, books and the other objects. And I've also outlined the other objects that are not the shelves and books with my Sigma micron in the size 003. It has a really tiny nib and you have to be careful using that to not destroy it. And I also added some highlights to these objects with the Uni Posca white pen in the size 007, which is an addition to my stationery that I bought lately, and I really love this. I didn't know, but I needed that one. Before we go to the mini flip through and the details, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who watched my 2023 setup and left a comment there or subscribed to my channel. I actually never really understood why YouTubers made such a big deal out of these things. Yeah, but I realized that now. With all your lovely words and your support, you really motivate me so much, and seeing that people actually enjoy my videos, even though there's so much for me to improve and my perfectionism really kicks sometimes, it makes me incredibly happy. So thank you very, very much for that. I appreciate that a lot, and yeah, I'm already really happy with the little community that might build around this channel, and yeah, thank you. So there's nothing left to say besides that I hope you enjoyed this video and that it maybe inspired you. Make sure to leave your favorite books in the comments, all the recommendations, ideas and tips. And if you like, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos. Thanks so much for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!